What if I told you that one of Greek mythology's most terrifying figures was also one of its most important? Not because he ruled a kingdom, not because he commanded an army, but because of a single eye, a giant's hunger, and a thunderbolt that helped decide the fate of the gods themselves. That is the world of the Cyclopes. In the oldest tradition, the Cyclopes were not just monsters lurking in caves. Hesiod describes them as three powerful divine brothers, brontes, steropes, and arges, children of Uranus and Gaia. They were one-eyed, yes, but they were also master craftsmen, beings of strength, skill, and raw elemental power. In Greek myth, these are the beings who helped arm Zeus with the thunderbolt that would change the course of the cosmic war against the Titans. But their story begins in darkness. Their father Uranus feared their power and locked them away, hidden from the light. That detail matters because the Cyclopes are born into a world where family becomes fear, and fear becomes imprisonment. Then Zeus rises, the old order breaks, and the Cyclopes are freed. In gratitude, they forge the weapons of the gods, Zeus's thunderbolt, and in some traditions, Poseidon's trident and Hades' helmet of invisibility. Suddenly, these one-eyed giants are no longer just figures of horror, they become the blacksmiths of divine power. And then comes the version most people remember, Homer's Cyclopes. Here, the tone changes completely. These Cyclopes are no longer noble craftsmen. They are wild, lawless, uncivilized shepherds who live in caves, ignore the rules of hospitality, and devour human beings. That is the world Odysseus enters when he steps into the cave of Polyphemus, the most famous Cyclops of them all. Polyphemus is the nightmare version of the myth. He traps Odysseus and his men, eats them, drinks the wine offered to him, and then falls into the trap of the hero's cleverness. Odysseus calls himself nobody, blinds the giant, and escapes under the bellies of sheep while Polyphemus screams into the dark. It is one of the greatest survival stories in all of Greek mythology, but it is also more than that. It shows the clash between civilization and savagery, intelligence and brute force. But the story of the Cyclopes doesn't end with Polyphemus screaming into the darkness. In later Greek traditions, the Cyclopes evolve again, this time into something even more fascinating. They become the workers of fire itself. Deep beneath volcanic mountains, especially around Mount Etna in Sicily, these one-eyed giants are said to hammer metal, shape weapons, and fuel the fires of the god Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith. And suddenly, the myth starts to feel almost real. Think about it. Ancient people didn't understand volcanoes the way we do today. Imagine seeing a mountain explode with fire, smoke, and molten rock. To them, it wasn't geology, it was the work of giants. The pounding inside the earth, that was the Cyclopes forging weapons. The eruptions, sparks flying from their massive hammers. This is where mythology becomes a way of explaining the unknown. The Cyclopes weren't just monsters anymore, they were the answer to one of nature's most terrifying mysteries. But there's another side to their story that often gets overlooked. The Cyclopes represent extremes. On one side, you have creators, beings who helped shape the power of the gods themselves. On the other, you have destroyers, creatures like Polyphemus who live without laws, without empathy, without civilization. It's almost like the Greeks were asking a deeper question. What happens when power exists without control? And maybe that's why the Cyclopes are always portrayed alone. Unlike other mythical creatures, they don't build cities. They don't form societies. Even Polyphemus lives isolated in his cave. That single eye becomes symbolic. It sees, but not fully. It represents a narrow, limited view of the world, strength without perspective, power without wisdom. And that idea still resonates today. Because the Cyclops isn't just a creature from ancient myth, it's a symbol. A reminder of what happens when intelligence is replaced by instinct, when isolation replaces community, and when power exists without balance. And yet, there's something strangely human about them too. They were feared, They were misunderstood. Some were creators, some were destroyers, but all of them stood at the edge of the known world where fear and imagination meet. So next time you hear the word Cyclops, don't just think of a giant with one eye. Think of a being who helped forge the weapons of gods, a monster who challenged one of history's greatest heroes, and a symbol of power, isolation, and the mysteries humans once tried to understand through story. Because in the end, the Cyclopses weren't just part of mythology. They were part of how humans made sense of the world itself. And maybe, in some ways, they still are.